John is the Senior Solution Architect Extraordinaire. He's going to be giving the session on the cloud. So, yeah, he's set up. I'm going to tee him up for great expectations. So, John Rutherford, if you'd like to come up. Thanks, guys.
Well, I don't know how to follow that up. Welcome, everybody. As Lisa said, thanks for joining us today. Can everyone hear me? Camera picking me up okay? Great, because I can really talk loud if I need to. So we run into a lot of questions about cloud. And those questions range the entire spectrum. And just so you know, all these terms, we're going to go into great detail and define every single one of these terms today. All right, I'm just making sure you're paying attention. Needless to say, cloud technology has really exploded in the last couple of years. And what we're seeing is a typical media production environment where you have, in some cases, a standard IT department, depending on the size of the organization, and then, for lack of a better term, the creative side or the creative teams that are creating that content. And IT departments are using cloud for certain things, and there's a lot of buzz around using cloud for even more things. So when we get into these discussions with customers and we start to identify what their needs are, what their goals are, and what the best ways are to get to those points, cloud discussions ultimately come into play. So anybody here certified with any cloud technology currently? Where's the plant? Where's the plant? I had one guy that was supposed to have his hand up. So with this new technology, as I'm showing here on the slide, there is a lot of information that's pertinent to the specifics of how the technology works, why it works, what's the best way to make it work. So this suddenly becomes similar to like a DIT or a MAM administrator, someone who's really got a very specific kind of skill sets of what they're doing in their environment. That, in some cases, again, depending on the size of the organization, maybe one person who's also wearing 3 or 4 or 5 other hats, right? So in the case of IT departments, there may be some sharing of information back and forth, but helping the creative teams understand what the IT department's mindset is and vice versa is where we kind of find our spot in that conversation. We come from creative backgrounds, as was explained in our bios, but we've also evolved. My personal skill sets have evolved to be much more of an IT kind of set of tools, because ultimately the camera is shooting a file. That file is going to a computer system. It's being stored on some type of storage. It's being edited and worked on, and all digitally, all electronic, file-based workflow. So IT information and understanding of how IT systems work is beneficial. And if a company or a customer doesn't have an IT department, we can help step in and navigate that. But it's important, particularly taking the example of like a MAM system, having someone in the creative team who's willing to kind of step up and take some ownership of this. Because we don't, as a reseller, we don't sell cloud services in the sense of what most people are familiar with. There's a subscription base, right? But we can help people understand the best way to get those services working for what they need to do. And that's kind of what we're going to go through in a very short order here. I was kidding, obviously, about the definitions of these terms. How many people would classify yourself as operations in your organizations? Just like standard operations. How about creative? Creating content. Delivering content. Okay. Anybody in IT? Okay, now we're getting a little bit more. So many of you that are in the IT part of your business are probably leveraging IT. Our company is 100% in the cloud because we're, as Lisa explained, we've got remote offices all across the country. We're headquartered in Burbank. We used to have our system in Burbank, which was challenging for us on the bleeding edge of the East Coast here to be able to not only navigate to that effectively, but have, quick response. Moving everything up to the cloud has helped our business run more efficiently that way. And what we're going to be talking about is not so much the business side, but how does the cloud leverage, as the title of the presentation is, with regards to creating this dynamic content. So none of these are going to be probably very new companies to you. Everyone's familiar with Amazon, Microsoft, and Google. These are their specific platforms that they work on in the cloud and that they offer their services for. I've also included a fourth one in there, which is private. And what we're finding more and more, again, depending on the size of the organization, is looking at a private cloud scenario may be a better approach. And I'll explain that a little bit more as we go through some of the finer details of this. As I mentioned, again, if anybody is looking to get certified with regards to Amazon, Microsoft, and Google, there are numerous tracks. Going back to that terminology page, there are numerous tracks of training and certifications available. I'm constantly getting emails from all three of these companies. Our next certification class is in your area, the second Tuesday of next week. Awesome. Not interested. Thanks, though. So there are lots of options there to step up into that space. The idea of working with a private cloud essentially is exactly that. You're leveraging the same technology that the big dogs are running with right now, but you own it. Now, typically, that's going to be positioned in a data center somewhere. Doesn't really make a lot of sense to have a cloud system on-prem. That defeats the purpose of it in a way. But there are lots of options for building up your own cloud service and be able to leverage that not only for accessibility, but for security, which is another big area that particularly our West Coast customers out in California, meaning the movie studios, are extremely anxious about. When things start going up to the cloud, into the internet, that gets executives really nervous. So working with private cloud systems give them the availability to open that up to people that they want to across the country or across the globe, but they own it. It's theirs. They know where that data lives, and they don't have to worry about any chance of anybody getting in and finding those files and posting them up on YouTube and ruining the surprise ending of a movie. So cloud services are fairly straightforward. The number one topic we typically have to address is storage. It's the service that most people are the most familiar with because they've used things like Dropbox, etc. They probably have started using either AWS or Azure or Google Drive or some of those. We've got quite a few customers actually that have broken the consumer level cloud services that they've been trying to use to kind of move content back and forth in a collaborative workflow. They've suddenly overloaded that system, and I won't name specific carrier providers, but they're all basically the same in the sense that they're meant to just be document or simple file repositories and not really be used for the kind of dynamic workflow that video and rich media requires. So when we start talking about things like storage, and we'll get into it a little deeper, proper cloud service providers like AWS, Azure, and Google have a lot more capability of handling some of that, but there's still a lot of caveats to work around. Okay? As part of the overall umbrella of what's happening in the cloud, we're also seeing and actually designing solutions around not only using cloud-based storage, but cloud-based computing. And examples of that most relevantly would be AI. The AI engines that are in development right now by all three of those big guys, as well as many others, are additively learning, right? They're going through a machine learning process. So we've got customers that we've done some beta testing with, for instance, with object and facial recognition. The success rate on that is probably around 35 to 40% at this moment in time, at least as of 2 weeks ago. We're going to continually see that number increase, but until, as an integrator, until I can see something north of 80% success, it's not something I'm going to recommend. But there's all sorts of other speech to text, audio recognition that can be leveraged very effectively, particularly when an asset management system is integrated into that. So we've got partners that we work with, particularly in the asset management space, that can do, obviously, on-prem systems. They can do full cloud systems, or they can do hybrid systems. And the way that they do that is the video files may live in the cloud, but alongside of those video files, particularly in the case of something like 4K, they're going to have a low-res proxy that's either generated and sitting on storage or is leveraging the computing power in the cloud to create that proxy file on demand and stream it to the particular device based on what the connectivity speed of that device is, right? So we're getting additional leverage of some type of artificial intelligence in the sense of you don't have to have 6 versions of the same file sitting in the cloud depending on whether I watch it on my desktop, my laptop, my tablet, my phone. The system will automatically deliver it to whatever resolution and bit rate is needed for that particular device. Infrastructure. This is another big part of the system of a cloud service is none of that's sitting in your building. It's all out in a data center or multiple data centers, and it's being handled by other people that are keeping an eye on that. You'll always, in those subscription models, have the ability to monitor your own system, but ultimately the full design and management and maintenance of that system is being handled by the people who you're paying that subscription fee to. And then, app development, depending on what the particular needs of the department or the organization are, those are services that those carriers provide. There's also, again, through certification programs, et cetera, the ability for pretty much anybody who wants to start developing apps to be able to tie into that. We've got a really powerful partner that we work with that is very heavily invested in customized app development for cloud-based workflows. And they're continually coming up with some great new products and ideas on how to leverage that. But again, there's a cost to that, whether it's an internal resource that needs to go through the training and understand what needs to be done, and then actually developing that and testing it and vetting it out and refining it and updating it and keeping it current. That's an ongoing expense, or you contract that out. It's still an expense, but it's just a matter of who's going to be keeping track of it. And then again, access is fairly obvious, right? If it's in the cloud, you can get to it from anywhere as long as you've got proper credentials for it. How many people are familiar with object storage? Okay. So the idea behind objects, how many people are familiar with RAID on traditional storage, right? So with RAID, you're basically taking a series of drives and blocks and sectors on those drives, and you're combining them in a very logical way to create a pool of storage, and then presenting that pool of storage in any number of ways, whether it's a SAN or a NAS. That's what it is, right? And your protection level is determined by the RAID level, meaning RAID 5 you're going to have in your bank of storage. One of those drives is going to have parity. In RAID 6 you're going to have 2. in RAID 50. You know, there's all sorts of different levels of RAID protection to make sure that that data is intact. The important thing to keep in mind with RAID is that if a single drive fails, you can pop a new drive in to your storage chassis, and the system will start rebuilding that. And the reason it can do that is because it's got that information shared across multiple hard drives, and it can rebuild what it was supposed to have based on the database information it's provided. When we get into object store, that whole model completely disappears. When we're talking about object storage, the algorithm that's used literally sprays the data across all the drives in a very complex way. And there's a number of different levels of redundancy, or what we call policies of redundancy, that you can configure. You can configure an object store system to have the ability to lose up to 8 hard drives and still be fully functional. It can all be fine-tuned depending on what level of comfort you or your organization wants to have on that. More importantly, to compare RAID and object store, what happens when you put a file onto a RAID system? Anybody? What does the file look like? Looks like a file, right? You can have directories, you can have directories inside of directories, you organize your files any way that you want, and if you want that file, you can go and just grab it and retrieve it. With object store, what happens is it's the second bullet point up there is when you upload a file into object storage, the algorithm takes it and breaks that file down into what are referred to as shards. That's why I've used a little broken, I don't know if that's ice or glass. I'm going to go with ice since it's cold out. It breaks that file or files into these small individual shards and then sprays those shards across all the hard drives. And then it keeps track of how that file has been broken down and where it has been distributed based on that redundancy policy. So the other part of the redundancy policy is not only how many drives can fail in the storage system, but how much redundancy do we have for any given file or any given object within that storage system. Because now our terminology is starting to change, right? What goes to an object store isn't a file, it's an object. An object is basically a placeholder, and within that object is all the metadata that's necessary to reconstitute that into a file. So when you upload a file into an object store system, this process starts. Now what we all see as the users is a progress bar for the file uploading to the system. Once the progress bar is done, all that's telling us is the file has been put up to the system. What we don't see is that process, that algorithm running to break that down and create the object. Fine, we don't care. That's happening out somewhere. I don't know where it is. It's out in the cloud somewhere. The issue is when we need to bring that back to our location, we go in and we issue what's called a get command, and we go to get that object, and we want a file back. So now the system has to reverse that process and reconstitute the file. Now, if this is a PDF or an Excel spreadsheet or a Word document or a database or any other type of file, that process is fairly quick. When you start talking about a video file in 4K at 60 frames per second that's been, running for, it's a 15-minute clip, that's a lot of data. That doesn't take minutes, it doesn't take hours, it can take days to reconstitute that file. So the retrieval process is where people get surprised because they want to look at using cloud, for instance, an archive mechanism. Again, for standard IT departments, using cloud for archiving basic business documents and things like that, great idea. Starting to throw big video files up there for archive and then in 2 weeks have a producer come in and say, yeah, give me that file back. I'll be done in an hour. No, come back in 2 days, and I'll have that. Well, that's not acceptable. Well, then you probably shouldn't be using that. There's other mechanisms to make that file more available in a shorter period of time. The way that objects are presented can be done in a number of different ways. You can actually, through applications and through GUI interfaces, have a directory structure emulated in the object store model, but it's not a true directory file system in the sense of going out and just pulling that one file down. There's still a process that has to be done to do that. So these are the things that we always have to make sure customers understand so that they don't get too far down that road and then get hurt by not only the time it takes to retrieve that data, but the cost. Which leads me to my next slide. Oh, where is it? There it is. So one of our vendors actually came up with a tool, and this is available online. You don't have to log in or anything. It's a free tool. You basically go in and you identify what your current on-prem storage is, what your particular cloud storage vendor is. In this case, I've chosen all three. I got AWS, Azure, and Google. And I picked ScaleLogic as my on-prem. But the important thing is this calculator will actually end up giving you the cost. Not only the cost to store it, but more importantly, what the cost is going to be to retrieve it. So when you start looking at these numbers, this can really start to turn ugly really fast, right? Because, hey, we've got a subscription, we're putting files up there, we're not hitting our limit right now, everything's great, and then all of a sudden a project comes up and somebody needs to start retrieving those files back down, and the bill comes in, and somebody says, who's paying for this? This is $10,000. Who's going to pay for this? So it's really important to make sure people understand the pros, but also the cons, particularly with regards to cost, because it can get expensive very quickly. Another reason having private cloud is something to consider if your particular organization or business is looking to start leveraging cloud services more aggressively. Now in video production, here's the other side of the coin, right? Time. Time is critical in video production. So standard production, we go out and shoot, somebody reviews that content, determines what we're going to use for the particular program, package, whatever the case may be. It goes through an editorial process, which more and more these days is collaborative, right? No single person is running the whole program so much anymore. It's got to go through VFX and finishing, and then we've got to deliver it. And we've got to do all of this in a very short period of time. Now, if we're in the process of working in the cloud, that can be very cumbersome unless it's a proxy workflow, because that can be done a little more efficiently, but you're not going to finish and deliver a proxy. You're still at some point going to need to pull that full resolution content down. So what we do is we help customers understand at one point do things go to the cloud. When do they stay on-prem? What's that balance look like? This is that hybrid model, right, where you still have some on-prem storage, but we're looking at the cloud as a potential tier within that overall storage design. The primary tier of storage is the fast, efficient, high-speed storage, high-performance connectivity that editors need, particularly as they start working with these higher resolution and higher frame rate files. And then we can start looking at what point in the life cycle of that content do we move it to tape, do we move it to nearline, do we move it to cloud, do we move it to all three? We help people understand and navigate through that whole process. But it's important to understand that once things start going up into the cloud, time is not going to be your friend. If you're on a mission-critical deadline, you better have something a little closer, something a little more immediate to work on. So I'm not going to read these because I'm assuming everyone can read. But the main takeaway here is to understand there are pros to this. I'm not here to say that using a cloud-based workflow is a bad thing. It's more of just making sure the decisions that are being made have been thought through with all the implications that may be affecting the final outcome and the final cost and the delivery demands that are required. As you see in my cons, high-speed internet is getting better and better. We've got 5G right around the corner here. That's going to really be a game changer for a lot of this type of workflow. But you're not going to know until you're there if you have that high-speed connectivity, that whether it's 5G or, we've got some customers that still have a 1 gig internal network. So there's your bottleneck. That's your outside pipe, your connection to that cloud storage. We've got vendors that are doing, as I said earlier, video workflows in the cloud, but those are based on a proxy model. How many people go back to the analog days where we did an offline edit? All right, buying you both coffee. Those days were interesting, right? Because we had to take this footage, which was analog. We had to get it into a system somehow, but it was too big for a computer at that time to actually work with. So we had to come up with a smaller version of that for an offline edit. And then once it was finished, the time-consuming part of putting it online at full resolution would come into play, and then it would get finished and output and delivered. Ironically, as analog has gone away, we're now looking at that same kind of workflow for a cloud-based. Yes? Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah, so the question was, if we're doing an online-offline editorial process in the cloud, when we do go to pull back down the full resolution, does it pull down the entire clip or just the portions of the clip that we're using? And the answer to that is the portions of the clip. You can go in and say, give me, with the systems that are available to do that type of workflow, you can go in and give yourself some padding, right? So if you can work with some additional transitions, or maybe you're not quite sure exactly the timing of that clip and you may need to slip it back and forth a little bit, you can put those handles on there as well. But yeah, the efficiency is that it will only pull down what you need. A big part of the pro side of this kind of workflow is also the ability to leverage that AI up in the cloud, right? Because once the files go up into the system and the AI engine kicks in, you now can start mining all that additional metadata with regards to, particularly, like I said, speech to text, audio recognition, facial recognition, object recognition. Those things are getting better and better. But the point is, you're not going to get that kind of ability on an on-prem system very effectively, right? Because the dynamics of that are changing so quickly. Yes? I'm sorry, say again?
What is your sense of the cost?
Of the value of that. Okay, so the question is, what's my opinion on the value of the cost of using those AI services? That is a completely subjective question, because we've got some customers that'll be like, yeah, we'll just have an intern tag it. And we've got others that are looking more long-term and want to make sure that they've mined as much of that information as they can, particularly if they're going to be repurposing it for other reasons. They want to be able to use all of that metadata for searching and organizing. It's a fine balance of determining how much of that you use to determine exactly what that value is. And again, I think what we're going to see in the next couple years is as those services and those AI engines get more efficient and more people start using it, there should be a certain level of decrease in that overall cost, right? Because we're now spreading that. The initial R&D and the building of the engine and the refinement of the engine has kind of been processed, and now we're kind of distributing that cost out a little bit more. But we'll see. You know, I don't run those businesses. That's their revenue stream. They've got to figure out how to justify that and make that more attractive for customers. But it is a very powerful tool if it's effective and applicable to your particular environments. You know, the biggest challenge we have with storage customers is, where is it? What is it? How do I find it? And the normal mechanisms that people have used in the past in a file-based directory file system structure is usually driven by a directory naming convention that goes down 10 or 20 levels deep, right? And somebody has that in their head. I mean, we've talked to people who literally are still running their asset management on a spreadsheet. So an asset management tool starts you in that direction. And to answer your question, that value has to be determined on what that asset management system is going to be used for and how much of that metadata is necessary. When you do process, for just about every one of the AI engines out there, when you process a file through the AI engine and you're ready to do a pullback on that metadata, you can actually go in and determine what metadata you want to actually bring down into your system. You know, it may go in and get everything: trees, cars, dog, cat, fish, human, you know, all these different pieces and parts. And you can pull just down the information that you need based on what your workflow requirements are. My last comment, of course, is the cost. And we've already gone over that, but just making sure that you factor that in. And we've got a few more minutes, so I just want to open the floor for any other questions. How many people in your personal life are using cloud storage of some kind? Dropbox, Box? Yeah. Is it work? Is it effective? Is it beneficial to you on a personal level? It's a powerful tool. And it can be a powerful tool in these kind of rich media environments as long as the proper expectations are set and the proper understanding is in place.
Well, John, maybe even to give like an example of a sporting team that we were dealing with, AI had the capability to say, okay, we can look at your sponsors' logos and tell you how much screen time they had. How valuable is that to be able to maybe adjust your marketing with them? So those are the types of things that it can deliver and do. So that's what people are looking toward is to see how they can use these tools to leverage those types of things from a very high corporate level.
Question about the workflow of video investment. Are there any anticipated technologies that you're looking at that's going to increase that, speed that up?
Quantum physics. I mean, that's the beauty of where we're at in the world right now. I mean, things are changing and advancing so quickly that, yeah, I wish I had that crystal ball because, man, I'd be investing in it like crazy. There's no doubt there are some extremely smart people putting a lot of brain cells behind that type of question because it is the cat's out of the bag and you can't put it back in, right? So it's more of finding the best way to deliver those services as efficiently, as quickly, and as cost effectively as possible to impact the greatest amount of your customer base, right? If I was that subscriber, if I was that subscription service, like Amazon, like Microsoft, like Google, you know, I know they're looking at how can we more effectively make this work. You know, we're actually because of this type of technology, we're having conversations with companies that do this that have never thought of working in a video or media production kind of environment. But they're seeing the metrics of what their systems are being used for, and they're suddenly seeing like, wow, there's a lot of this. What are these files? What is all this stuff that people are putting up into our service, into our cloud? And so they're seeing that there's a demand for it. And where there's a demand, there's an opportunity, right? So they're going to be putting everything behind it. Things like the 5G, networks that are going up, those are going to make the accessibility of cloud services more attractive, right? Because now I've got essentially, landline speeds off my phone or off my tablet or off my, as the chips go into laptops, I'll be able to get that kind of speed off of my laptop and not have to deal with, a hotel room internet connection speed. So those things will continue to evolve over time. And there's a lot of research still going on in that space. So right now, like I said, the current media workflow for that is based on a proxy model, but back to that online-offline model. I fully expect in my lifetime to see full online editing, but it's not there yet. We've got customers that have been trying it, and it's bloody knuckle experience right now. It's painful. So.
Do you have to do the drawings?
Oh yeah.
But are there any other questions before we do that? Anybody else have comments?
Now, just because that's going to go on the top, that doesn't. Yes.
You mentioned private clouds. Is there any specific software platforms that you recommend? I've dabbled a little bit in the Linux-based cloud solutions.
Yeah.
Is there something specific that you use or recommend?
Well, again, that comes from our standpoint. That comes down to the manufacturer of the actual object store system. So, without going too far into specific manufacturers, there's a manufacturer that actually literally makes the hard drives, and they have an object store system that's available, and it's basically tied. Its main protocol is S3. They also support Glacier. That just seems to be the big dog right now as far as the protocols are concerned for development. Because what they really do is they just provide the object storage with a base level of management tools, and then it's, build on top of it. But yeah, Linux is by far the leading, platform in that respect. So if you need no command line, great. If not, better start learning it.